Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
This show is sponsored by Set for Life Insurance, the ultimate client experience in the insurance industry. Are you looking for the perfect insurance coverage that suits your needs? Founded in 1993 by President Jamie K. Fleischner, Set for Life Insurance specializes in individual life, disability, and long-term care insurance. As brokers, they represent numerous companies in the industry, ensuring that their clients get the best products at the most cost-effective rate. What sets Set for Life Insurance apart? You'll enjoy special discounts, priority underwriting handling, and even exceptions in the underwriting process. So why wait? Contact Set for Life Insurance today and let them be your insurance partner for life. Visit their website at www.setforlifeinsurance.com or call them toll-free at 1-888-553-3559. Hey everyone, welcome back to Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath. We've got a powerful guest joining us today, the one and only Dr. Nisha Mehta. If you haven't heard of her, where have you been? She's a radiologist, a nationally recognized thought leader in the physician wellness and finance space, and the founder of Physician Side Gigs and Physician Community, where she leads over 200,000 physicians in navigating financial empowerment and career fulfillment. Today, we're going to dive into her story, how she got started, how she built Physician Side Gigs and Physician Community, and we'll hear a little bit about the trials and tribulations of being a social media personality and a very public figure in the physician world. Not only that, we're also going to touch on a little bit of finance and talk about what Nisha recommends we do if we feel like a recession is coming or a recession is on the horizon. So let's jump in and get to it. Dr. Mehta, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited that we were able to do this. I know we've been talking about it for a while. So.
Oh my gosh, I've been trying to get you on my podcast for so long. This is
sorry.
a really special day.
This is a true, it's not you, it's me situation. I promise. Yeah, things
you're a busy lady.
Busier than I would like to be. Yes. But it's just so fun to, finally be able to connect on so many of the things that I know both you and I have been passionate about for so long. So I think it'll be really fun to talk.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. But first, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey for people that don't know where you come from, what your family is like, and what your clinical journey has been? Fill us in.
Yeah. So I am a accidental entrepreneur. Much unlike what physician side gigs may imply, I definitely did not venture down the pathway of entrepreneurial business stuff with any sort of intention. I'm a radiologist by trade, always intended on fully being only a radiologist, and had some time off between jobs and really started delving into the physician wellness space. And that was back in 2015, and starting to write some articles about just things that I thought needed to change about the culture of medicine. I think it was just right place at the right time. And some of those things went viral on some fairly big outlets. And I started getting invited to speak a lot on some of these topics and to write a lot on these topics. And that was my first foray into physician side gigs and entrepreneurial stuff. And really, PSG actually was formed out of a desire to talk to other people who were sort of having the same questions that I was when they were being asked about things like, what are your rates? Or hey, here's this 1099 thing that you need to fill out. And what is that exactly? And so really just started to connect with other physicians who were doing things outside of medicine. And PSG was born. Again, never intended to kind of grow to what it is. But I think so many of us have this desire to diversify our income streams or at least to see what else is out there for different ways that we could either use our medical skills or explore our other passions outside of medicine. And I think that momentum just led to a lot of people adding their friends. And before we knew it, we just started growing really fast. So now, as of I guess the beginning of this year, we hit that 200,000 physician mark. We've got about 40,000 people on the wait list waiting to join. And so it's been really cool to just see the momentum. And along with that momentum, just the change in mindset that I think a lot of physicians have taken towards their careers, and just making sure that they're really taking the best steps to empower themselves, to set themselves up for success, whatever that looks like for them, both personally and professionally. And so that's really my passion, is really charting ways for doctors to find ways to have that career that they want, and be able to have like that life in medicine on their own terms. And I know that that can mean a lot of things to different people, and I think that's exactly the point, right? It's not about following some sort of set pathway. It's about figuring out what works for you and what works for your life. And for me, that's always been such a big thing, as somebody who, in a lot of different realms, in radiology and in medicine and like whatever. Radiology is a very male dominated field, or at least has been traditionally, and just kind of getting through that process and kind of learning, like, I need to set my own rules for what I want things to look like. Like, there may be other attendings that are okay being here till 9 p.m. reading, their list of 100 MRs to make the most RVUs. But like, I've got 2 kids at home, and I'm married to another physician, and that's not my life. And so, I think that's my big thing, is really just trying to say, hey, what are the tools that you can put into your toolbox such that you can create that life in medicine that you want? So, larger picture, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am married to a surgeon. We have 2 boys who are now both in middle school. So we are like entering a different phase in life. But it is, yeah, that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Well, thank you so much. I feel you. I were just a few steps behind you. My 2 kids are kind of at the end of elementary school right now, and I definitely hear you in the desire to give people the tools to create medical life on their own terms. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that year that you took off, where you were really looking into burnout? Were you at the burnout stage yourself? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, that's actually, it's interesting because I wasn't burnt out when I wrote it, but I felt like I was seeing it all around me, and it was sort of this, how do I prevent that from being our situation? And at the time, I will say, actually, I shouldn't say that I wasn't burnt out. I think I wasn't burnt out professionally, but I was certainly burnt out personally, right? My husband was in the middle of his fellowship, or he was at the end of his fellowship at that point when I had started to write. He had had 3 years of just literally 100+ hour work weeks. And my younger son, who was only 1 at the time, or maybe he was like 18 months at the time, he actually had legitimate stranger anxiety with my husband. Like,
Oh
my
my
husband
gosh.
would come into the room, and it would usually be at 2 o'clock in the morning when my son was nursing, and he would freak out because he had no idea who this man was that was in his room. And my husband and I were just kind of looking at each other, being like, is this the life that we want? Like, we were both in academics at the time, and we liked what we were doing professionally, but it was also just all the things with 2 young kids under the age of 3. And we were, I was on faculty with grant funding doing PET MR research, and my husband was in this very busy like reconstructive plastics fellowship. And we were just trying to balance so many different things. And the kids would go to bed, and then I would jump on to writing like letters of recommendation, or looking at, grant proposals, or this or that. And I was like, this is like, there are so many things about this that I love, but I also feel like it's not a good setup for the 4 of us going forward in terms of what our lives were. So it was really kind of a combination of, hey, what is the life that I'm trying to build in medicine? And just kind of looking around me. My dad is a cardiologist, so I grew up around medicine. And I feel like I was kind of thinking back on what the stories were of all the families that we grew up with, a lot of whom were also in medicine, and sort of saying like, okay, we've got this dual physician family. What does it mean to be a dual physician family right now in this moment where all this administrative stuff is kind of going up? A lot of the laws are changing. There's a lot that's like starting to become unfavorable towards physicians. And it was sort of, how many battles are we going to fight? And what are the things that really like are going to enhance career longevity in this situation? And I think for me, that's the bigger thing. Like, I think burnout is such a great buzzword term that kind of took off so that everybody kind of identified with the problem. But for me, it's really where's the career longevity, right? Like that's where I see, and I've like always been a big health policy person. And to me, this is like one of the biggest health policy issues in the country, because it's sort of, how are you going to keep healthcare workers in medicine? And you look at the challenges coming down the pipeline, and you look at the fact, like if you look at female physicians, for example, 40% of female physicians will either cut back clinically or quit medicine entirely within their first 7 years of practicing medicine. And if you look at the fact that that's 50% of our workforce, that's kind of terrifying, right? For every doctor that's like 72, that is, an older male that was married to a like stay-at-home mom, sort of that demographic that we're replacing. When they retire, who are we replacing that with? And in general, it's going to be a physician, whether male or female, that is on average wanting to work a little bit less than what that generation of physicians wanted, mostly because they're either in dual physician families or because the culture of medicine has changed so much and the landscape of medicine has changed so much that people don't want to stick around for as long, because some of the things that were really bringing them joy in medicine have now kind of exited the landscape, right? So like I always tell the story about my dad. Like to this day, every blanket in my dad's house was knitted by a patient, right? Like every time that I would go into the mall, even now to this day, when I go into the mall in like suburban Pittsburgh, people will be like, "Oh my God, your dad saved my life," blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's just a very different feel for what medicine used to be, and what that doctor-patient relationship used to look like. And I think that's what we all grew on into medicine loving, right? Like that's the heart of what we do that really inspires us to kind of go above and beyond for everything. And when you take away that joy, that feeling of going above and beyond starts to go with it. And because of that, we see more of these questions of, well, how do I get to financial independence? How do I blah, blah, blah? How can I cut back clinically? And for my dad, it was never this question of when am I going to be able to cut back clinically, right? Like I think we had to drag him kicking and screaming into retirement because he didn't want to, right? Like, and the pandemic hit and we were like, Dad, maybe it's time to not do, all of this stuff. It might not be the safest time for you to be rounding in the ICU or whatever. But I mean, that was like, he never wanted to leave. And it wasn't about if he had enough money to retire. And it wasn't about if, we grew up with EKGs streaming through like our fax machine at all hours of the night. And that was fine and normal. And like, nobody complained about it once. So it wasn't that we weren't prepared to work hard. And I don't think this generation it's not that they're not prepared to work hard. Everybody knew that was the job. The question is like, is it worth it? And before, that resounding answer was always yes. And I felt like when I was going through fellowship, in my early years of being an attending, all of a sudden I was seeing more and more of like my older attendings or my senior partners kind of saying like, I'm not sure this is worth it. And I was like, whoa, what is happening? Like what's changing, right? And so that's really what made me kind of want to dig into, what is it that we need to change to get people back to having that joy in medicine that keeps them around?
Yeah, so I totally hear you there. I feel like the administrative response to physician burnout, instead of fixing some of the issues that we need fixed, the real issues, which is appreciation and job security, they have actually gone in the other direction and made medicine more of an assembly line that kind of dissociates the patient with the individual physician, but then makes I guess, more workforce available at all times. But unfortunately, what that does is it decreases that sense of, I really did something good here and made someone's life better. And that personal connection that you get, being that physician that's there for people all the time. And I think you are very much right about that.
You just want to, at the end of the day, right? Like this is my goal for every day right now is at the end of the day, I want to feel like I did something good with my day, right? And I don't want to feel like I spent my entire day like chasing hurdles and trying to get past some sort of roadblock that was purposefully being put in my way, whether that's, I'm a radiologist, so I don't deal with prior authorizations that much, but right, like those are the kinds of things where you're like, I didn't go to med school for this many years to spend the majority of my day doing that or justifying why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, I just want to be able to be in a room with a patient and have a connection and feel like I'm making that difference. And the further along that or further away that we get from that being the overarching sentiment of what you remember about your day, the more that you're going to see people sort of saying, well, like, yeah, I know that there's this part of it that's the heart of it that I love, but then there's all this other stuff that I just don't want to be a part of my day every day, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm really hoping that some of the innovation that's coming down the pipeline and hopefully some of the reform that's coming down the pipeline, a big part of what I do these days is advocacy. And I think like really just, I think we're finally getting some momentum where people are starting to see these shortages piling up. They're starting to see the reasons why so many physicians and other clinicians are leaving medicine, and everybody's saying like, "What is wrong here?" And I think once the public starts getting more and more awareness of that, and as they have their own frustrations with the healthcare system and start to voice those more, there will hopefully be a little bit more momentum for real reform that I don't know what medicine 2.0 looks like, but I think that we're inevitably, just because of market forces, headed towards it. And hopefully it's something that doctors can get involved in and really shape the future of.
Yes. Can you give us a preview of what's coming down the pipeline that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I think that all change requires two things to happen, right? Both the public markets and the private markets have to change if you really want to create transformative change within an industry. And so when you look at the public side of things, the momentum for reform is strong right now, and that's for better or for worse, right? I think in November we had that unfortunate incident with the United Healthcare CEO, but it really created this conversation in the country about what is wrong with healthcare today. And it really shed the light on some of the issues with insurance-based medicine and where profits are being put relative to patient care. And so I think there's a nice national dialogue that's happening, and physicians are really, we're 1 million doctors in the US, right? A little bit less actually. And so in order to create real public change or real policy change, you really need the patients to be on the same side, right? Because everybody's a patient. And so once you have that momentum from the patients coming together with the clinicians and saying, hey, healthcare is not working for any of us, right? And we've got the system now where it's really like everybody on one side, hospitals, patients, clinicians, anybody in healthcare business, and then there's insurance companies on the other side, right? And so I think there is this opportunity for a lot more regulation that many people are looking at, both from the, on the lobbying side, on the legislative side. There's just a lot more momentum for some meaningful reform to happen. I know on our side, like we were able to get prior auth reform done and passed in New Jersey back in last January, or it actually went into effect this January. But it was a really great push where it was cool to see, like literally we saw some legislation that we wanted to take across the finish line. We were looking for prior auth reform. It was being considered in 29 different states. And we were like, what's the state that's the closest that we could take it across the finish line in? And we saw New Jersey had this bill that had been sitting there literally for 3 years. And we went to the senators that had drafted the legislation. We were like, why is this not, like, what's holding this up? And they were like, it doesn't seem like anybody cares about it. Like nobody has contacted us about it. And we were like, well, that's funny because like here in our echo chambers, we all care about it a lot and our patients care about it. But sometimes it's just a matter of if nobody's talking about it, then it doesn't become a legislative priority, right? So our goal then became, how are we going to create the conversation about it, right? And so we put together this pact of patients and clinicians together pact, right? And we literally just mobilized on a grassroots level this very large campaign in New Jersey where we got thousands of letters signed and sent and calls made to the legislative officials in the key districts where we needed the votes. And we basically, within the course of 3 months, were able to get the insurance companies to come to the table and come to a deal for meaningful prior auth reform in that state.
Wow.
That went into effect in January. And literally, it was a very concerted campaign. It took about 8 weeks to do, and it took over our lives for that 8 weeks. But it was able to get it across the finish line. And there's so much stuff like that that's sitting in various forms in all these different states. And now we have, like, again, this public spotlight on what do we think is wrong. And so it's, how do you take that momentum and funnel it into something that is actually going to make a difference? And one of the things that, I love on our side is, hey, we've gotten all these physicians together in one place. Like we can make, meaningful movements, right? Like when the pandemic hit, we got 300,000 signatures over the course of a week, and we were able to get, when I remember when we first talked to Pelosi's office, they were like, yeah, we don't help doctors. And we were like, so you're not going to include them in the stimulus package? Like, you're just going to let the private practices fail when, like you're bailing out casinos, but then you're calling us healthcare heroes and telling us to go to work without masks on, and you're okay with our practices failing? And the answer from Congress was basically, yeah, we're okay with it because who cares about doctors, right? And then, but all of a sudden it was like, we had the public on our side, we had our momentum, and we were kind of like, well, like we've got 300,000 signatures for doctors here that are thinking about not coming to work anymore, because if that's how you're going to treat us, then maybe this is like, there's a limit to how much you can ask us to sacrifice, and they held up the stimulus package for 48 hours, and they got us $70 billion for private practices and hospital systems to like be able to address some of the key things that we needed to do to keep people employed during a time of like a lot of financial uncertainty. So it's really, how do you build those movements and funnel that side? So that's the public side of things, right? Is you've got the momentum now where you've got clear unhappiness with PBMs, insurance companies, all these major players in the healthcare system that really are not benefiting any of the end users of the healthcare system, right? And you can build momentum against those things. So I think that's one side of things. And then the other side of things is the health tech and the private sector, right? So what is it that we can do in terms of using technology now in a way that we've like never had this kind of, it's an unparalleled time for the capabilities of what some of this technology can do. And the question is how do you leverage that technology to make things better for people, right? So like full disclosure, I'm on the advisory board of some of these companies that are innovating. So, but there's some great solutions out there in terms of like AI scribing, for example, right? How do you get back some of that charting time and some of that pajama time that all these clinicians are spending after hours, right? What is it like to go home and not have any notes that you need to complete in the afternoons? What does that do for physician wellness and clinician wellness and well-being, right? Like to actually be able to go home and recharge instead of coming home and saying, okay, I got to get through dinner and then I've got 3 hours of charting that I've got to do, right?
Right.
So what are the ways that you can leverage technology to be able to do that? It's same thing with like, there's a lot of great AI products that are coming out with billing and coding software. Like, can we get paid better for what we do without having to deal with the endless cycle of denials and prior authorizations? And can we streamline those processes so that we're able to cut out some overhead from our practices and we're able to, actually get paid for what we do, and then be allowed or be able to increase access to care for our patients because we have the ability to get paid for what we do. And so I think there's all of those kinds of things that are also coming down the pipeline that are very practical solutions to problems that have, been barriers because of the degree of overhead or resources that they've sucked up. And so leveraging that technology to address some of those issues in healthcare, I think is going to be another thing that's really, really important.
Wow, what a journey. From building a movement to advocating for real, tangible change in healthcare, Dr. Nisha Mehta is showing us all what's possible when purpose meets passion. We're going to pause our conversation here because I had so much to talk to her about. But don't worry, we have only scratched the surface so far. In the next episode, we'll dive deeper into how physicians can prepare financially for uncertain times and a potential looming recession, and how side gigs and strategic planning can be your superpower. So be sure to join us in part 2 of this conversation. Until next time, keep building your freedom and stay frugal, y'all.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.